What's up, everybody? Welcome to the 34th episode of the PlayStation Drive. I actually got the episode number right this week. I'm one of your hosts, Ryan Turford, and I'm joined, as always, by the man himself, Matt Sawinski. Matt, how are you doing on this lovely, lovely Thursday today, good sir?
I'm doing well, my friend. Hopping into some games I love. There's been a lot of video game going on in my world the last little bit, and I'm not upset about it. How you doing, my friend?
I'm doing well as well. You know, it's a nice foggy day out today, and +1. At least it's vastly different than the pictures that Sean Capri shared with me this morning of like just snow everywhere and it being like -30 out. So there you go.
No, thank you.
Thank you. Of course, this is the PlayStation Drive where we talk about PlayStation, not about the weather. So we're going to clean the garage a little bit. So folks at home, if you want to support the show, there's a number of awesome ways to do that. Number one, of course, you can subscribe to us on your podcast feed of choice. We're on Apple Podcasts, Google Play, Spotify. We're on all the things. So check us out there. Also, if you leave us a review or rating on Apple Podcasts or Spotify, we would really appreciate it. Some people might have noticed some funkiness with the podcast feeds as of late. We just switched to a brand new podcast host. We're on Anchor now. So if anyone at home notices anything weird, just reach out to me at Ryan Turford on Twitter or just on the Discord, which is free to join the show notes as well. And let us know in case anything comes up. We had some problems with the Xbox Drive and the Nintendo Drive this week. So that's why I wanted to preface that here. Also, if you want to see our beautiful faces every week, head over to YouTube, youtube.com/Yumi Capri. Also, if you want early access to this and all of our shows, head over to patreon.com/Yumi Capri. They're a little tip and they'll tip jar and out comes content. Well, without further ado, let's grab our 8 tracks, pop them in. It is time for the playlist to talk about all the things we played. And Matt, you've got another list here. So I'm going to start with you. What'd you play?
So I finished Horizon Zero Dawn and then very quickly after finished The Frozen Wilds. I liked it. I think it's good. A lot of the issues that I had when I spoke last week kind of remain throughout the entirety of the game. I still think the world is too big. I still think kind of traversal through the world is just not that fun because basically if you fast travel over somewhere and then you have to start looking for a mountain, otherwise you're running. I really liked Aloy. I liked the world. I liked the core story. And I think Frozen Wilds had also a very interesting follow-up. I genuinely hope that the writing is a little bit better next time around because there are some parts where like the dialogue was supposed to try and make me feel something and I was laughing instead just because of the way that some of the characters were portrayed and written. Along with I don't think I very much liked any of the characters outside of Aloy. I think at best they were fine. And some of them were just downright unlikable. But like the monster design is fantastic. The world design is so cool. And I really do think like Forbidden West is going to be a huge step up in quality. So I'm excited to finally be caught up after years and years. This is one that's been like burning in the back of my mind, like finish Horizon.
It happened. We finally got Matt to finish it because you've been talking about this pretty much ever since we started the show where we were talking about when, Horizon was announced and just how you hadn't even played the first one. It's been on your bucket list forever. So I'm glad you finally finished it.
I know. I'm so happy about it. And then I decided to hop into Final Fantasy 14 for the first time in like a month. I wish it was a thumbs up, Ryan, because my experience was god awful.
Okay.
Queues were fine, but the day I decided to hop back in, our lovely internet provider Rogers decides to have massive issues in the area. So I had about a 2-hour incredibly frustrating time, not to the fault of Final Fantasy 14, but my internet kept dropping and I was even like on party chat with a friend of mine and we could barely hear each other. I kept like running to an area, there'd be nothing, and then all of a sudden everything would spawn and I'd be dead because evidently I got attacked 800 times and my health bar just decimated right away.
Yeah.
But it was nice to hop back in to start getting a feel for my character again, and I'm going to continue playing. Hopefully the internet works with me. And then very quickly, PlayStation Canada was kind enough to send over some codes for God of War PC. So while it's not on PlayStation, still a PlayStation game. Damn, dude, I basically did like the intro tutorial section right up until that first massive boss encounter. I had just finished it. And like this game is so badass. I keep forgetting about how good it is and then being able to hop back into it. It runs great on my PC so far. Looks wonderful. I plugged my DualSense in and had absolutely no issues connecting with anything. No frame rate issues, no problems whatsoever. And I'm playing on like ultra settings and I've had very little issues at all. It's just so good. And I'm excited to keep going with it because I haven't played it since it came out. And, thank you to PlayStation Canada for sending those over because we're going to have something up on our channel soon for it because it's awesome. I'm really enjoying it so far.
Nice. And actually just for full transparency as well, we also did receive codes for Sean as well. So Sean is actually playing the PC version as well currently as well. And maybe you guys will talk about something after the show. But I've heard nothing but great things about the PC version. Unfortunately, my laptop that I basically use for everything is not powerful enough to run the game. So I'm actually not playing it as well. But I'm glad you guys are enjoying it and having a great time with it, and that it's actually running pretty well. Cause like, Sean and I talked about this yesterday kind of off air. But I'm curious to know like how powerful is your PC anyways? Like, is it like a kind of a middle of the road PC? Is it like a more powerful PC? Like, especially because you said you're running at ultra settings at 60 frames per second. So I'm curious like how powerful your rig is, or like maybe it's like it scales down well.
I have a pretty decent computer as far as I understand. I haven't had like a proper gaming PC ever, and this is the first one that I got back over the summer. And as I understand it, all of my PC friends, I sent over the specs to them, and they're like, "Yeah, this is going to keep you busy for a while. Like it's going to keep you supported." I think I have like a 2070, a super 2070 or something along those lines, or within that kind of range. But yeah, I have a pretty good PC, I think, because like, I've had no issues with it so far.
Nice. That's cool. That's good to know. Cause I think like you and Sean probably of all of our staff members probably have the most powerful PCs. So I'm glad that you guys are the ones that are actually taking a look at this game as well. So there you go. Again, huge thank you to, of course, the PlayStation Canada. Also, I'm sorry that, the day you tried to play Final Fantasy 14, Rogers went out. In fact, I know I've had problems with them all week because on Tuesday, I was basically without the internet for the entire day because of just a giant outage. So it's been nothing but fun with them. But as for me, because I did have a bit of an internet outage and because honestly, I'm not playing any current games for the most part. I did play a little Final Fantasy 14, but I've basically uninstalled the game for now to kind of prevent me from continuing to play it because I want to take a break from the game for at least a little bit because I don't want to get burned out on it. So I posted this on Twitter and kind of throw this in the Discord as well. But one of my goals over this year is to play as many RPGs as possible, whether they're kind of RPGs that I've never played before or kind of like revisiting a lot of old games. RPGs are kind of like my favorite genre, of course. Everyone kind of knows this from listening to our other shows. So I want to basically kind of immerse myself in RPGs throughout the year. So I actually started with a series that I'm actually brand new to. We're planning on doing kind of a RPG Cave episode on this series a little bit later in the year. And I wanted to kind of get up to speed with a lot of these games. So I'm actually playing a Valkyrie Profile 2 Silmeria on PlayStation 2. This is a turn-based RPG from Square Enix, but it's also developed by Tri-Ace, who actually developed all the Star Ocean games. But this series, for those that haven't played any of the Valkyrie Profile games, because they haven't been around, like the newest entry is on the Nintendo DS. So it's an older series. But it reminds me a lot of Indivisible, if people played that game on current gen consoles, which is kind of like a Metroidvania mixed with a turn-based RPG where basically all your 4 party members are on your 4 face buttons, and you basically press the face buttons in certain combinations with your characters so they perform combos on the enemy. So that's kind of how this game is set up as well, where essentially again it almost feels like Indivisible is almost like a not a straight ripoff, I should say, but like almost like a clone of this game. So it's really cool getting a chance to play a game like this and going back to it. And I'm having a lot of fun kind of revisiting games, like older games, especially on PlayStation 2. Expect that to kind of be a common theme, at least for a little while until next month, when we'll be talking about, of course, all the new games like Horizon and stuff like that. Or like, I know that for me personally, the first new release that I'm excited to check out this year is the Life is Strange Remastered Collection, which is going to be out kind of at the beginning of next month. So until then, I'm basically on the PS2 train at this point. So we'll see how long Valkyrie Profile 2 is, but I'm having a lot of fun with it. So I'll talk about that more next week because I just started it this week. So there you go. All right.
That sounds awesome. What an interesting combat system. I've never heard of anything that, like, I looked at the game and it actually looks really cool. I might have to try Indivisible now because I think I own that on Steam.
Yeah.
But yeah, that sounds awesome.
I really loved Indivisible too. So I'm glad to kind of go and now play kind of the inspiration for this. They even did like on the DS, they did a Valkyrie Profile game that was a tactics game, almost like Fire Emblem, where it was like a grid-based tactics game. But it had the same battle system. So like but in order to kind of use your other party members, you had to kind of group them up around the enemy. And then the number of party members you grouped around an enemy we would then be able to use them in the combat. So if you kind of walked up with just one guy, you only get one person in combat. So they only do like the skills by themselves. But if you get all 4 party members to surround them, they like totally like overkill some of the enemies. So yeah, they've done some really interesting things with the series. So I'm excited to check more of them out, especially because there's also a PSP game as well. The PS1 game I'm probably skipping, which is the first one, because it's like $600 on eBay for a copy of it. So
oh my God.
Yeah, it's very expensive. So I think I'm going to skip that one, which is why I started with 2. But there we go. So all right, let's slam the brakes on this conversation. It's time for some breaking news. And to be honest, Matt, there's not a lot of news in the world of PlayStation this week. Let's not kid ourselves. So there's even, I joked about this on the Xbox Drive yesterday with Sean, that there was like hardly any news in Xbox, but there's like even less in PlayStation land. In fact, we have to basically kind of go outside our normal wheelhouse, because normally we don't talk about like reported stories or things of that nature, but this week we kind of have to speculate a little bit, because I mean, for the most part, we're kind of grasping for straws for news this week. But at the same time, I think some of these stories are important to talk about as well. So I'm glad that we have this chance to talk about it. So first off, in a report from Bloomberg, Sony is now ramping up production on PlayStation 4 consoles due to the accessibility of the PlayStation 5 at the current time. The original plan was to discontinue the console completely in late 2021, but this looks like it's been pushed back until 2023 at the earliest. Basically, because of all the exclusives that we're getting this year for that we know of are all coming to PlayStation 4, that Sony wants people to be able to buy these games and play them. So they need to be able to offer a way for people to play these games. And unfortunately, they just can't. They probably realize they can't make enough PlayStation 5s to do that. So they're making more PlayStation 4s. Matt, what do you think about this news story?
I think it's a good call, considering the state of the world as it is right now, and especially what's going on with the PS5s. I think this also might mean that we might see more PS4 titles than I think I at least initially anticipated. For me, I thought that this year kind of would have been the end of the cross-gen. I wouldn't be surprised if we kind of see that push in a little bit more into next year now. Just because, again, there's people who want these systems very much so and just can't get them. And with a lot of these bigger titles this year coming, cross-generationally, I mean, why not? I think this, for me, and I saw this point being made on Twitter, and I think it really resonated with me. This really just showed the very, very brilliant decision that Xbox made with the Series S, because those things are now pretty readily available. You don't have to really stress too much to find one if you really want one. While PlayStation, I mean, they did have their 2 different SKUs, but the only fundamental difference was the disk drive. So I think now, they kind of have to make more PS4s if they want more people kind of in, because of how hard it is to find a PS5. But yeah, I don't know. This to me seems like a move out of necessity, not because they wanted to do it. But what do you think, Ryan?
Yeah, absolutely. Like 110%. I think it's definitely an answer to the Series S, which we saw, and we talked about this on the Xbox Drive yesterday, but Phil Spencer did that interview with the Wall Street Journal talking about how the Series set of consoles is actually outpacing all of the previous generations of Xbox. And after analysts did some work to kind of like look at some of the numbers, around this point in the generation, the Xbox One had sold 12 million consoles. And the last time we got numbers from Sony for the PlayStation 5, which was a couple months ago, we were at 13 million consoles. So we're probably due to hear some more numbers from Sony soon. But the fact that Xbox has almost sold as many as Sony reported 3 months ago just goes to show you just how much of a boon the Series S has really been for them, where essentially people have been buying it because it's available. And because I don't know if you've looked at the prices on PlayStation 4 consoles recently, Matt, but the PS4 Pro in particular is like going for close to, if not over, the original retail price of the PlayStation 4 Pro. And in fact, like some of us actually gasped at because I don't know if you remember this, where GameStop did that promo late last year where you could trade in your PlayStation 4 Pro for almost at cost. Yeah. That's the reason why, like, they're so hard to find, and people want to find something to play these games, and they stopped making the PS4 Pro a while ago, actually. So, because like this report's only claiming that the PlayStation 4 Slim is coming back and not the Pro. So, that console is like very hard to come by and pretty expensive now. So, this move makes a lot of sense when you kind of factor the secondary market and how much people are willing to buy some of these consoles, I think.
Yeah, and especially with this, and I will get into this a little bit on the next story, but with this rumored, Spartacus unveiling supposedly coming sometime soon, if they are kind of blowing up the service in a way that's going to make, older consoles actually more feasible, if they're going to make, if they're going to offer a lot of these older generation titles that people have been looking for, and now guess what? You can play them on PS4 as well because you're going to be able to stream them. I mean, an entry point is an entry point, right? Like if somebody doesn't have a PlayStation for whatever reason, shape or form yet, it sounds like this might be a decent way to kind of get in. I just do wish that there was something. It confuses me that they're not going more towards the Pro than the Slim, but
yeah.
I guess they're really trying to show that like this is the cheaper version. This is the PS5, right? Like I think they're just doing it more because it's probably a little bit easier to produce on top of the cost.
Yeah.
But yeah, I don't know. I'm very curious to see when the day is going to come that you can readily buy a PS5.
Yeah. I mean, I'm still thinking it's 2023 at the earliest at this point. Like I'm thinking this ain't happening anytime soon. So I think this is a wise move from Sony. I think the report stated that they're basically going to start with 1 million units, see how quickly they sell through them, and then kind of go from there in far as like kind of ramping up production more to kind of meet the demand anyways. So I think this is really interesting. Also, to kind of go back to a point you had mentioned earlier, yeah, like with any other announcements we get this year, like I don't imagine we get too many more exclusives from Sony announced this year as it is, besides the 3 that we already know about, unless of course the VR console of course comes out this year, like PlayStation VR 2 comes out this year. But the only other exclusive that isn't announced yet that I expect that to be announced is the Last of Us Remake. And I think that might be our only PlayStation 5 exclusive from Sony this year. Like, cause they might not have pivoted in time, for example, to port it on PlayStation 4, or maybe that one makes less sense to put on PlayStation 4 when the Last of Us Remastered is already there, kind of thing. So I think that's the only one like exclusive we get from them at all this year. That's PlayStation 5 exclusive. But otherwise, you're probably right. Like they're going to pivot more towards PlayStation 4 now, I think.
Yeah, and especially because like I'd imagine, like you said, that the Last of Us Remastered will be a PS5 only, but I still imagine that Factions is going to be cross generational, so that'll be the kind of like even if you're on PS4, here's a new Last of Us experience that you can still kind of jump in on. Because yeah, like I can't imagine then they would lock that only behind PS5, considering The Last of Us 2 is still a PlayStation 4 game.
But Matt, you're just assuming The Last of Us 2 Factions ever comes out at this point.
That's true.
I'm losing hope every single day that ever comes out at this point. Honestly, like, and we talked about this because I guested on the PSVG podcast last night, and something we talked about on that show was the idea of maybe they wait until they do like a Last of Us director's cut, like somebody Last of Us part 2 director's cut, kind of like what they did with Ghost of Tsushima, where they have like a PS5 version of Last of Us Part 2, and then maybe that's where they put Factions rather than having it be kind of its own thing. So maybe they tied into that instead, but we'll see. We'll see. I mean, who knows what's going on with Factions at this point? I mean, they haven't even talked about that in like, I can't remember the last time they even talked about Factions at this point. So who knows? All right. Next up, after an internal memo from UK Game Store Game leaked with the recall of PlayStation Now gift cards, Sony has confirmed that they are moving away from PlayStation Now gift cards to focus on the cash PlayStation Store gift cards instead. So when this first report came out of this internal memo kind of leaking, people had suspected basically that this basically meant that, the Project Spartacus was on its way, that something was going to kind of replace PlayStation Now anyways, because these gift cards were actually starting to be scooped up. And we had actually heard from other retailers around the world as well that this was actually a global thing that's been happening for a while now. And this was actually the first time publicly that we'd heard something about this. But Sony basically came out and made a statement about this saying that, oh no, this isn't actually, we're not launching anything else. This is just, we want you to just buy like the PlayStation gift cards of like $50 and then spend that on PlayStation Now instead, I guess. But Matt, what do you think about this story? Do you think that's accurate? Do you think something else is going on here? What do you think?
I think that's 100% accurate, Ryan. I think PlayStation has no reason to keep us in the dark about anything that might be upcoming. I think they're being very honest and not at all hiding the truth with this. I think this is awesome. I'm happy that we're finally seeing some sort of movement because, like you said, Jason Schreier by Bloomberg already confirmed that like this had already been happening in the States. So like they're very clearly, prepping for something. And with all the, recent rumors about Spartacus and the recent trademarks filed as well, it really does seem like something is coming, because there was trademarks filed for like, backwards compatibility and like backwards compatibility for cloud saves and stuff. So there's something coming. I mean, like there has to be. And I think more and more this like February-esque state of play that's supposed to be rumored, because, PlayStation loves to do their state of plays right before they have major games coming out. And with, Horizon Forbidden West and Gran Turismo coming pretty much within, back to back at the end of February and beginning of March, I'd imagine that they're going to have a state of play in February to prepare us for those games anyway, and to kind of give us a bit of that look forwards over the next few months. And I think that's a perfect time to bring, the Spartacus discussion into play. If they're getting ready for it, I don't see why they would pull the cards now and then announce something like 6 months from now. Now, whether it's going to come out immediately is a different story, but I do really think that this announcement is imminent. If the state of play in February is real, I really do think that that's when they're going to do it. And I'm just very, very curious to see how robust the service is going to be. I really want to know just how deep the PS1, PS2, and I imagine PS3 collections are going to be. I really hope they don't take the Nintendo route and they're just going to kind of drip feed stuff out very, very slowly and give us like the games that, very, very few people that are genuinely interested in playing. I'm really excited. I really want to see what they're going to do. I hope the upgrade path is going to be is going to make sense. I hope that we're going to learn more from it soon. But what about you, Ryan? What do you think? Is this imminent?
Yeah, I think so. And actually, I don't even think they need to see it for a state of play, and I don't even think it gets even announced at a state of play. I actually think it is more likely that it's just a blog post one day that, hey, PlayStation
Really?
Plus Platinum, which is what I called it during our predictions episode, is a thing. Here's the date, kind of thing. And we kind of go from there. Like, I don't know if they really do more than that, to be honest. Like, and I kind of talked about this when we talked about kind of the idea of when does God of War get announced. And I also think that like the release date for, God of War Ragnarok might even be, a blog post, because ultimately, and we've seen this before with state of plays before, I think that the next state of play might even just be a Horizon Forbidden West state of play and not like a general state of play that just focuses on the game. Because we've seen that before with other games. Like we saw that with Ratchet and Clank last year, for example, or Returnal. Like they did one right before it that wasn't like a general state of play. It was just one that, it would just focused on the one game. Or they could even do one that's like a crossover. It has like half the state of play is Gran Turismo and half of it is Horizon. And then they do like 15 minutes of gameplay from each one, and then they call it a day. Like that's more what I'm expecting from the first state of play from Sony versus like, I'd actually be more surprised if the next state of play was actually a general state of play with a bunch of announcements from like other companies instead of just focusing on those two games. So that's why I think it's more likely that if this is coming anytime soon, like anytime before the summer, that I think it'll just probably be a PlayStation blog post outlining things. Otherwise, if this isn't coming out until like later in the summer or later in the year, maybe, then that's when I maybe see, okay, that's going to be part of maybe like an April state of play before E3, or whatever kind of Sony's like quote unquote E3 state of play is, whether that's because last year I think it was in July. So I would imagine that's where we get that if it's later in the year. But otherwise, I think it'd probably just be hey, here's all the information you need to know about it. It's in the blog post. Because I mean, they probably don't need to show you like they might put together like a hype trailer or something like that. But I don't know if they even necessarily need to like. It might be a better like information delivery method to actually do that in a blog post versus a state of play where you can't probably devote more than maybe 5 minutes to talk about what it actually is. So
how long do you think it will be from announcement to launch? Like, do you think this is going to be a thing where they announce it and, a week or two from that point, it kind of comes out? Or do you think this is going to be like, get ready, we'll have more information for you in 3 months? Because like, to me, I think a quick turnaround for a kind of service like this makes a lot of sense. I can't imagine that it's going to be like, this to me seems like a very weird thing to announce far out and then try and like generate hype for. What do you think, Ryan? How quick do you think this is going to turn around?
I think the turnaround will be fairly quick. If it's not the day of, it'll be within a week, because originally I was like, well, I looked at the PlayStation Now kind of turnaround where they announced it like a year before it was ready and then it was out. But because of the way like that I'm imagining they're going to integrate kind of current subscribers with PlayStation Now into this and stuff like that, like I would imagine it's probably a quicker turnaround because it is kind of just an upgrade on what's already there. Because again, you don't want, there will be feel bads involved if like someone's, paying for PlayStation Now currently like on a yearly subscription But then they find out, 3 months from now or a year from now, they're getting so much more value than what they're currently, signed up for.
True.
So I think it'll probably be a quicker turnaround, despite, PlayStation Now is kind of, year-long rundown where we were even speculated that you were going to rent the games rather than kind of getting them kind of a la carte. So yeah, I imagine it's probably a quick turnaround, especially because this is also going to drastically probably change how Plus is structured as well. So I imagine that they want to kind of like spin that pretty quickly. But
I just want to know what it is, Ryan. I'm so curious. This is one of the things that like this year for me, I am so genuinely excited and curious about. And I really hope they stick the landing on this because I just want to know. I just want to know, Ryan.
And hopefully at least with some of the backwards compatible selections will be better than, the PlayStation Classic backwards compatible, selections as well. Like a game like Valkyrie Profile that I talked about before, like that would be a game that would be perfect for the service because it's so freaking expensive.
Right.
But who knows what third-party partners are going to kind of bring to the table for that, or likewise, like how Sony's going to have to write checks for some of those games. Like I think that's going to be interesting. Also, I'm curious to know like kind of if you're going to be able to buy some of those games separately or not, but we'll see. And then last news story this week actually just came out this morning, and I thought this was like really interesting, like from an idea perspective. And this is kind of like the second of like 2 kind of like really interesting anime game ideas that we've seen this year. My Hero Academia is getting a free-to-play battle royale game called My Hero Academia Ultra Rumble. It will be a smaller battle royale with 24 players on a map featuring many characters from the hit show. It will be coming to PlayStation 4 later this year with a closed beta starting soon. We haven't seen like a trailer for it, but there's screenshots for it because again, this was announced in Famitsu magazine of like Bakugo basically shooting some people and then like Deku basically saving some civilians and stuff like that. And they showed off like you can play as Shigaraki and All Might, and basically I would imagine most of the main class from Class 1A. But Matt, what do you think about this story? Because I thought this is like really interesting, a really interesting idea for a My Hero Academia game.
Yeah, I 100% agree. I am morbidly curious about this just because like I really don't know if it's going to be good. I genuinely have no barometer about what the quality of this game is going to be. But similar to that Dragon Ball Z asymmetric game that we talked about before, I'm glad that they're starting to do something a little bit outside of the normal wheelhouse with these anime games. And I'm also genuinely surprised that this game seems to be you are playing the heroes and villains that we do kind of know and love. Just because like I'm really curious as to how you factor that into a battle royale. Just because usually, in the spirit of battle royales, you drop in with next to nothing and you kind of have to figure your stuff out. So I guess this might be a bit of like a hero-based battle royale. And like, I don't know if you're collecting like power-ups or upgrades to your abilities or something, or how much, like you said, saving civilians and stuff. If there is going to be a PvE element almost kind of going on while you're battling each other. I'm just really curious to actually see some footage from this because we don't learn much from those screenshots.
Yeah.
And like, if this is good, I'm 100% in. If it's free to play, and I'm just so curious as to how this is going to land because I think this, if done right, this could actually be really, really awesome and a lot of fun. And I think 24 players for a game theoretically is that like what we're kind of talking about. I think it's a good amount. I think any more than that, it would just get a little bit overwhelming.
With all the characters having superpowers, and I imagine like traversal is going to be really easy to do in the game. Like it makes perfect sense for it to be a smaller player count for that.
So do you think, Ryan, this is going to be like almost like an Overwatch situation where like if you pick a certain hero, it gets locked out for other players? Or like, do you think there's going to be like possibly 12 Dekus running around? What do you think this game is going to be?
I actually think it'll probably be closer to Overwatch, where essentially like there will be, 30 characters to choose from, but like once one gets picked, that's it kind of thing. Or maybe there's one, maybe if you do teams, for example, like there's one of each character per team, for example. Like, but again, we won't know. But that if I had to speculate, that's what I would, that's what I would be thinking anyways.
Do you think we get like a heroes versus villains mode possibly? Like, is that a thing that you think could work in this space? I mean, thematically it works, but
like a 12v12, I think like I think they could probably easily do that. There's enough villains for them to choose from, and obviously there's more than enough heroes for them to choose from. So I think that would be like a really interesting idea rather than doing like duos or quads. You could do like heroes versus villains, like 12 versus 12. I think that would be really cool. But yeah, so I actually really love this idea as well. Like have played kind of the last two My Hero Academia fighting games, like one's Justice, and I think they're okay, but I don't think like My Hero Academia as a property really transfers well to like a 3D fighting game that well. Whereas like a much more open battle royale setting with kind of characters having individual powers, I think it'll probably fare a lot better in a scenario like that. So that's why I'm actually really excited to try this out. I mean, again, it's going to be free to play. So, and I love My Hero Academia. So you better believe I'm going to be, downloading this and trying this out. Cause even if it's bad, I want to at least try it, see how it is. And I'm excited to see what that first trailer, cause yeah, like just like you, I want to see kind of what this game looks like in action to kind of maybe get more excited about it. But I think this is a great idea. Just like Dragon Ball The Breakers too, where we're starting to see some unique kind of anime show ideas. And I'm here for that. I love it.
I just hope it lives up to the hype that was Hunter's Arena Legends, another great battle royale from last year. I just hope it's that level of quality, Ryan. I won't ask for anything more than that.
Of course. Maybe it'll be free with Plus. Who knows? All right. Let's
now we're talking.
Yeah. Let's let some of our friends into the car with us. It is time for the carpool. Folks at home, if you'd like to have your question read on the carpool, there's a number of ways to do that. Number one, we put up a question post on Twitter at Yumi Capri's every single Wednesday afternoon. Usually it's some kind of goofy GIF from me, usually an anime GIF, but this time we're out actually did Horizon. Also, if you leave a comment on YouTube, if you're watching there with a question, we'll answer it on the show. Or if you join the Yumi Capri Discord, again, it's free to join. Links in the show notes. Go to the PlayStation Drive question and kind of section and ask your question there, just like Todd Oxtra at Toxtra did on Twitter. And he actually asked a question very similar to the second topic we just had there. Do you think we're more likely to get PlayStation 1, PlayStation 2, and PlayStation 3 games through the new PlayStation All Play service? Yes, I named it. Yeah, that was Todd Oxtra's name, of course. Or should we expect remasters/remakes? So, Todd, I actually think that you're going to just see PlayStation 1, PlayStation 2, and PlayStation 3 classics. I mean, I don't expect too much change from PlayStation 3 because I don't think they're going to have like a PlayStation 3 emulator to play those games natively. I think they're going to still be streaming, unfortunately, which breaks my heart because I think that I would have loved to see kind of them play natively because some of those games you just can't go back to. But again, if they have like more, PlayStation 3 RPGs, that's something you can definitely play, through streaming, but it sucks to do that. But PlayStation 1, PlayStation 2, for sure, I think they're going to be just straight up ports using maybe even the same emulator they used on PlayStation 3 and PSP, but I don't know, maybe a kind of a revised version of that. But Matt, what do you think about this?
Well, first off, I want to give a shout out to Todd. I was just on co-op mode. We did a whole bunch of predictions for 2022 across all the big three and third party. So go check out co-op mode. We had a lot of fun. We created some games that I hope we see, and I hope that we don't. But to answer his question, I think you're right, Ryan. I think you're 100% on this. I think it's just going to be ports. I really do think that the only reason they're even doing this is because of Game Pass. I mean, with Jim Ryan at the helm of PlayStation right now, who is very much like an old game is old mentality, I can't see him putting any more money and resources into this than he absolutely has to. And like I said, I think this for me is just more a response to Game Pass than it is anything else. So I think it's going to be. I hope it's not as bare bones as Nintendo's offerings, but I'm not getting my hopes up for, true kind of, backwards compatibility where they're really going to, have a better frame rate running and everything. I think what you're going to get is a pretty much here's the game you wanted it, play it. Like I don't think it'll be anything more than that.
And it actually, I have to correct myself a little bit because I had mentioned kind of them maybe developing a PS2 emulator, but we know they already have one for PlayStation 4 because we know that we already have those backwards compatible PlayStation 2 games on PlayStation 4 that there was a select few of them that they did. But we know that those are out there. So we already know there's an emulator for PlayStation 2. It's just a matter of them developing an emulator for PlayStation 1 and then basically licensing those games. That's all that I'm expecting them to do. So yeah, I'm with you. Like, I don't think they're going to do the Xbox thing where they're going to, add a bunch of enhancements or anything like that. I think they're just going to be straight ports, which I'm all for. Because again, like some of these games, again, like, I don't know. I don't necessarily want to turn my PlayStation 1 or PlayStation 2 on again to play. Or likewise, I love the idea of some of these being more accessible to crowds that maybe don't want to boot up older consoles, or the fact that, PlayStation 1 and PlayStation 2 games are becoming much more expensive nowadays, like not having to shell out, insane prices on eBay for even some of the most common games. So yeah, I think this is a good move all around. As far as the name, PlayStation All Play Service, I don't know. I think it's okay, but it doesn't really, it kind of describes what it is, but it doesn't, because you have to also remember they're kind of like at least from what we heard from the the leak of this is that it's going to be tied to Plus somehow. So I feel like the PlayStation Plus name will be part of it in some way. So I don't know how well PlayStation Plus all play service, for example, kind of rolls off the tongue. But it's interesting, Todd. I like that. I like where your head's at on this one. All right. Next up, Andrew Semichek asks, what do you think will be the big AAA title that will come to PlayStation Pass when it launches? So first of all, Matt, do you even think there's going to be a big title that comes to this service when it launches? It looks like those are all like, that's what everyone wants to talk about this week. So do you think we're going to get a big title with this? What do you think?
I really don't know. I'm more inclined to think that we're going to get a title, a big third-party title that just somewhat recently came out. I wouldn't be surprised if we get like Call of Duty Vanguard or something along those lines. I don't think we'll be getting anything along the lines of like Rainbow Six Extraction, where it's like day and date, here it is on PlayStation Pass. I don't know, but at the same time, I can totally see them doing that, like, because I don't think they're going to put in anything relatively recent first party wise. I think if we get up to something like Returnal, I think is like the kind of newest quote unquote that they'll go for something like this outside of maybe some of their remasters. But I could then in that vein, I could totally see them trying to get a bigger third party game to launch on the service day and date to kind of help bolster that. But I don't know, Ryan, I'm kind of two minds on this. I can really see it going either way. Where are you at on this?
Yeah, I don't see them doing big first party releases day and date at all. But at the same time, I could see them maybe doing something similar to what EA does with the EA Play Vault, essentially, where like after a game's been out for a certain period of time, they just put it in the vault essentially, and then it becomes, free on the service. So for example, something like Returnal that you mentioned, maybe that's not a day and date thing, but maybe that's something we see on the service included in it before the end of the year kind of thing. Like, or like I could see them doing that with like any titles that didn't really sell super well. Maybe something like Demon Souls, for example, even though I think it sold pretty well. I think sales have really just tapered off with that game. So maybe that's the type of game, for example, I see being there, or something like Sackboy's Big Adventure, something like that. Like, where something I'm hesitant to say Miles Morales, because even though it's been around for a while, we know it's like the second most downloaded game in America on PlayStation 5 in the last year. So probably not that one, but I think like maybe Demon Souls or Sackboy, I think are probably the most likely candidates to kind of be day one games for the service. And then I think like you'll see stuff like Ratchet in there eventually. Like it'll probably get filtered in like either a year or two after it's out. Like I think you'll see it in there. So stuff like that, I think is like more like I would compare it more to the EA Play Vault versus something like Game Pass. Is just my read on the situation.
Do you think it's possible that we might get that EA Play style? Okay, you can play the first 5 hours of the game or whatever before you actually have to purchase for the bigger day ones. Like instead of being like, okay, here's, Returnal day and date, you can play 5 hours of it and we'll give you a discounted, price on it. Do you think that's more likely even with the third party stuff?
So yes and no. I mean, first of all, we already see kind of full game trials on PlayStation Plus, but they're not like, they're never usually day and date games anyways. But the way that EA does it is that they basically create a special version of the game for EA Play where it basically limits you, even though you have the first 10 hours of the game. If it's a game with a campaign, it lets you play like the first 2 levels. And since we mostly from Sony see first party experiences being, linear storytelling, like story games or open world story based games, they'd basically have to do something similar, I would imagine, because conceivably, for example, like a game like Uncharted 4, for example, if it had a trial like that, you could beat the entire game with the trial, right?
True.
So that's why, like, I think that they're more likely not to do something like that because of the work they would go into doing something like that. Whereas I think EA probably sees, merit in doing that, which is why they do that. But they don't do that with every game either. Like Jedi Fallen Order, they didn't do that with. But for the most part, they usually do that with a lot of their games. But also a lot of EA games have multiplayer modes. So I think that's where we see more of that, like trying out the Battlefield multiplayer or trying out the Star Wars Battlefront multiplayer. I think it really helped them. I think so. I'm less inclined to think so. But what do you think?
I think you're right. I think you might, and especially given how weird they've been so far with these kind of trial-like things where, yeah, you get 5 hours, but that's including you downloading it. I can see them doing some kind of weird asterisks on it where they'll say, yeah, you get 10 hours, but there's some underlying subtitle that changes depending on the game.
Yeah.
But I don't know. I'm very, very curious to learn more about this. But yeah, I wouldn't be surprised for a big AAA title that would come to PlayStation Pass. I really do think that's PlayStation and likes to be buddy with Call of Duty. I wouldn't be surprised, especially if Vanguard sales aren't as crazy as people are, as Call of Duty's past. I can totally see them bringing the multiplayer over or something. I don't know. I guess we'll see.
Yeah, I guess we'll find out. Hopefully soon, anyways.
Mm-hmm.
And then last question of the week comes to us from Dano on Discord, who asks, are there any third-party controllers for PlayStation 5? I know they wouldn't have DualSense, but aside from possibly premium controllers, do they even exist at this point? So I looked into this. I don't actually think there's any third-party controllers announced at this point that are PlayStation 5 exclusive. They're obviously, PlayStation 4 third-party controllers that work on PlayStation 5 as well. But I don't think there's ones native to the console that have really been announced at this time. So I don't think so. But we'll see. To be honest, I don't know when when we're ever going to see that kind of thing.
Yeah, I think I'm very curious to see if we'll see more stripped down versions of the DualSense in a time where they maybe don't have the adaptive triggers and the rumble on as the the haptics. They mentioned who was it? Dano mentioned they do have the SCUF controllers and stuff. They have some PS5 exclusive ones for that. But again, those are premium controllers that you're paying quite a bit more money for. Right. So I'm kind of curious to see if we see some more stripped down versions of the DualSense, because I think you're right. I don't think we'll get a true third party DualSense as it stands with all of the features implemented. But I don't know. Sony seems to be a little bit weird with a lot of their accessory stuff right now, as we've talked about extensively with the PlayStation, so with the PS5. So I don't know. I guess we'll see.
It's I can't even believe that we're this close to Gran Turismo and they haven't even announced a racing wheel, a first party racing wheel or even a third party racing wheel for that game. Because people are going to want that type of thing. So yeah, it's just stuff like that I think it might be a little while before we hear more about. But anyways, we had to go. But before we go, Matt, plugs go.
Yeah, you can find me over on Twitter at burnout_Matt or on YouTube at youtube.com/burnoutbrighter. We'll have something coming up for God of War PC once we get a little bit more time into it. Along with our mental health series, we will be launching this coming Monday. So if you're listening the week that, the day this comes out, the following Monday, we'll have our first mental health, we're calling it mental health power up episode going up. And it'll go for about a few months every Monday. Each one covering a different topic of depression or anxiety or suicidal ideation with a lot of doctors, psychiatrists, and wonderful people who took the time to come talk to us. So come hang out.
Very nice, my friend. As for me, you can find me on Twitter at Ryan Turford. You can find us on Twitter at Yumi Capriz, on YouTube at youtube.com/Yumi Capri, and on podcast services around the globe. So for Matt Sawinski, I'm Ryan Turford. This has been episode 34 of the PlayStation Drive, and we're out. The PlayStation Drive is fueled by patrons over at patreon.com/Yumi Capri, and I want to say thank you to each and every one of our patrons from the bottom of my heart from your support across all of our content. And let's start by thanking our premium producers, Dallas Ford, Lee Navarro, the fearless leader of the Phoenix Overdrive Extra Life team, and Jonathan Brown over at youtube.com/PM Entertainment. Our platinum producers, Robbie Ballaby Miller and Trucker Sloth, and our gold members, Argo, Brendan Myers, Dallas Robbins, Emily O'Kelly, Heather Boney, James Johnson, Joel Brooks, Jose Jimenez, Mac Time, Benji Kong, Marcus O'Neill, RJ Kern, Dano, Skinny Matt, Mr. and Mrs. Nasty Boots, Fulia Fuji, and Xavier Reyes. Thank you all for all of your support.